on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the headlines of this hour. President Donald Trump declares a golden age of America in his State of the Union address, defending his economic record amid sliding approval ratings. With Republicans fearing midterm losses, he credits himself with lowering inflation, cutting taxes and drug prices, and driving stock markets to record highs. Trump delivers his annual address amid falling poll numbers and a Supreme Court ruling that strikes down most of his signature tariffs. He largely sticks to script but turns combative on immigration, trading, shouted barbs with Democratic lawmakers. President Donald Trump signals he may order military action against Iran, saying he will not allow what he calls the world's top sponsor of terrorism to obtain a nuclear weapon. Despite building up US forces in the Middle East, he offers limited detail on why such a strike would be necessary. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Israel for a two-day visit aimed at deepening strategic ties as US-Iran tensions raise fears of regional conflict. Modi, who made a historic first visit in 2017, seeks to build on growing defense and diplomatic cooperation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Chancellor Friedrich Merz begins his first official visit to China, pushing to reset trade ties and address strains on Germany's manufacturing sector. Meeting Premier Li Qiang in Beijing, both sides back free trade amid US tariff disruptions and sign agreements on climate and food security. The United Nations Security Council expresses deep concern over escalating violence in Sudan and calls for an immediate end to fighting. The Council condemns drone attacks on civilians and aid workers, including multiple strikes affecting World Food Programme operations. Japan says it will deploy surface-to-air missiles to its western island of Yonaguni by March 2031, signalling a stronger defense posture near Taiwan. Guests, the president made no mention of the newly released Epstein files. The speech also significantly avoided discussions on recent violent immigration enforcement incidents, such as the deaths of US citizens Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minnesota at the hands of ICE agents, and details of mass deportation strategies that have polarized communities. In foreign policy, key issues like Cuba's oil blockade and tensions in Latin America went unaddressed, and there was no reference to trade or strategic outer territory interests, such as Greenland. Critics contend these omissions reflect a campaign-style address designed to boost Republican fortunes ahead of midterm elections, rather than a comprehensive overview of major controversies facing the nation. Now, joining us live in the studio, we have Mark Sutherland, a geopolitical commentator from London. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now, what do you believe is the overall significance of Trump not addressing some of the controversies in his State of the Union, such as Greenland and Cuba? Do you believe that a president would normally touch on these international disputes in their State of the Union, or is it an attempt to just gloss over some of the more controversial issues that his administration has been facing lately?
Respectfully, I don't think, in my humble opinion, I don't think it is actually glossing over. I think it's diplomacy. I actually think there are many, many things that are going on in the background. Some of those I've discussed on NewsX over the last few months. And it's down to departments to then sort that out. The key thing is, as President Trump has often said over the years, you don't show your hand, you don't show your enemy what you are then about to do. We go back to the bombing last year in Iran and the B-52s and suddenly appearing and doing that, and all the ins and outs of that leading up to that. So there is I would say that I would put that forward as well. The Greenland argument with Europe, all of that, there are negotiations that are behind the scenes. And as you've seen, like when the King of Denmark has gone over there showing glad hand and join in with the people that are living there in Greenland. That's all this diplomacy, but there is much action that's going on. And of course, when you're referring to Cuba, there's lots of history there. Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK, and the people of Cuba, yes, they need releasing from a communist regime. There are many relationships between a lot of people that have fled Cuba, then gone to live in Florida. Mark Rubio's family, of course, with all their Cuban links, and also Ted Cruz. These are, I believe, it's what's going on in the background. But I will say this, of course, his naysayers, the Democrats, we had to view Ilhan Omar's over the last 4 years when the Biden regime and the mass immigration and the illegals coming over the border has been a real issue, even if other people want to deny that. But finally, if you are the man that writes the art of the deal, then you don't show the opposition your hand until finally when you're about to pounce, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Mark, you touched on Minnesota. Do you think that American voters, Democrats and Republicans alike, will notice the fact that Alex Preddy and Renee Good were not mentioned in his State of the Union, seeing as they were two very high-profile deaths in the domestic situation recently?
It's extremely sad that those two people died, and in the circumstances that they did. But the other thing is that, remember, President Trump's base, he promised to sort this out and to remove illegals from America. There are many bad actors inside America. It's not conspiracy. There are many bad actors. But the other thing is, and also we can say this, both sides have to be respectful. It's very important of this in regard to no one being above the law, but illegal immigration, as in other countries, including here, is also a huge issue and has to be addressed. Now, the ins and outs of why he didn't mention that, of course, the opposition, his opposition, and others will make hay.
This month, following communications between him and Epstein being passed to authorities by the government. Mandelson's lawyers say he had agreed to attend a voluntary interview with police next month, and they have requested evidence justifying his arrest. Mandelson himself has previously expressed deep regret over his association with Epstein and is cooperating with the police investigation to clear his name. Joining us again, we have Mark Sutherland in London, a geopolitical commentator. Now, Mark, Mandelson had exited politics in the UK twice before due to controversies, and was still appointed ambassador, presumably with a vetting process. Do these revelations about Mandelson's behaviour affect the trust that the British public have in their politics?
Big time is my immediate reaction, of course. The question is, excuse me, of why, to many of us that look at these events, have looked at these events since the Blair administrations and then Gordon Brown, is why after Mandelson was kicked out twice, Jeffrey Robinson, £375,000 loan that he didn't declare, and also the comment of trying to find British passports for two Indian businessmen, kicked out again, and his relationship. So people just thought, well, we know this, so why don't you? So that was extremely silly to then appoint him in the way that it did, and people have been very angry about that. But I would just throw this in. We've just seen Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince, arrested in Norfolk, and I would say that in the court of public opinion, there'd been a chatter to say, well, if you're arresting him, why has there been no arrest of Mandelson? I'll just throw that out there, the chatter. Now, we've now seen Mandelson arrested, and as his lawyers have stated, in their view, that he was arrested because the unfounded allegations that he might have fled the country. I will say this: I'm no fan of Peter Mandelson, but if he had actually done something like that, that would not have been a very good look at all. If you're going to fight and fight against the music, then you need to stay here and do that. But the accusations are fraud in public office, and the concern and the accusations of him then passing information that go back in regard to the banking crisis 2009-10, and then passing comments to Jeffrey Epstein at that point. So these that is what this is actually strictly about, of when you're passing information and abusing the position that you are then in. Over to you.
As you mentioned, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince, has been arrested as a result of some of the Epstein files released, but we still have to wait for 3 more million files to be released. Do you expect to see more high-profile names from the UK to be seen in these files, and perhaps even more arrests as well?
We could do. I mean, frankly, honestly, I don't know. What we do know is that it's, in my opinion, is that it's a very, very interesting period of history. A lot of people suffered in the banking crisis. They saw their jobs go, they saw their businesses go, and disrupted a lot of people's lives. And it's not very pleasant to then hear that the accusation is that certain people at the top that are then privy to information that we are not, to then abusing that position. That is not comfortable. That kind of level of communication that goes for many countries. We need to address that. But the other issue is as well, is that people then begin to question the law. Is the law fair? There's lots of discussions over here about two-tier justice. And is the law fair? The law, everyone should be equal under the law, no matter what status or position they are in society. And that is a huge question for the UK over here at the moment and in other places. But as you said, you're focusing on the UK. That is a concern of many people.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Now moving to Latin America, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has met United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan in Abu Dhabi for a working meeting, which was aimed at strengthening cooperation between the two countries. According to reports during the visit, the two leaders have discussed the deepening of their strategic partnership with a focus on boosting trade and investment cooperation. Bin Zayed has noted that the strategic relations between the UAE and Brazil, existing for more than 50 years, continues to strengthen. He has emphasized that the broad range of cooperation that both countries seek to advance in accordance with shared priorities and long-term goals. However, Lula has highlighted the importance of UAE participation in the Tropical Forests Forever facility, which was launched during the 2025 United Nations Climate Change Conference, and has also invited Bin Zayed to visit Brazil. Now joining us live, we have retired Lieutenant Colonel Himanshi Singh, who is a Defence and International Relations Analyst from New Delhi. Himanshi, thank you so much for joining us. Now, in your opinion, with Brazil and the UAE being middle powers, do you think that the security issues like the Middle East and the nuclear negotiations underway between Iran and the United States will play a large factor in the discussions between the two?
Thank you, Ruby. This meeting represents a convergence of two pivotal middle power navigating rapidly fragmented world order, and Brazil under Lula is repositioning itself as a leader of Global South and revitalizing the diplomatic footprint through BRICS expansion, South-South cooperation and climate diplomacy. And the UAE, meanwhile, has transformed itself from an oil exporter to the global financial, logistic and sovereign wealth powerhouse. So why this meeting matters so much? Because the world is shifting from US-China bipolar competition to a very fluid multipolar order. And in that order, we see strategic autonomy is a currency. So both Brazil and UAE, they are seeking precisely that. UAE sits at a crossroad where Asia, Africa, Europe and it is a logistic and capital hub, whereas Brazil is an agricultural superpower and a critical minerals reservoir. So when these two economies align, we see, they're creating a South-South economic corridor that bypasses the traditional Western bottlenecks. Now, if we see the economic and energy diplomacy, Brazil is an offshore oil producer and it is an innovator in renewable energy, whereas UAE is dominant energy exporter and clean energy investments are done by it. So joint ventures in hydrogen, biofuel and carbon markets are highly probable outcomes that we see. And moreover, UAE has sovereign wealth funds and Abu Dhabi Investment Authority are largest in the world. And Brazil at this moment requires capital for infrastructure and modernization. It needs the ports to be developed, the rail corridors to be developed, and the green transition, which is happening all across the globe. The Brazil also needs it. So we can expect a longer-term, infusion of UAE capital into Brazil, and not just in energy, but in logistics also. And as far as the food security architecture is there, UAE, as we know, produces hardly any food articles. And Brazil is one of the largest exporter of soy, beef, poultry, and sugar. And in the world, which is disrupted by the Ukrainian war, and now the Red Sea tensions are brewing. So food corridors are a strategic asset. And this meeting strengthens UAE's food security and guarantees Brazil also about a long-term demanding partner. And now we also see, the companies, both the countries are part of the BRICS, because recently UAE had joined and Brazil is likely to conduct the next meeting. So we can also see a lot of local currency trade settlements. It's more of hedging, everybody is trying to gain more security. And everyone is looking for newer partners, and especially the middle path. They are looking for partners who can be long-term partners, and while not looking at the other side of the world, that is US and China. So even from strategic point of view, this meeting is very, very important because it will strengthen the South-South geopolitical alignment. It will enhance the economic resilience against Western sanction regimes, as we have seen how Trump plays about his tariff retaliation. Then it will give secure food, energy and finance corridors. And it will also, expand BRICS institutional muscle. So I see it as a win-win for both the countries. The potential outcomes would be multi-dollar, infrastructure MOEs, expanded agricultural export agreements, clean energy investments, and local currency trade mechanisms. So that's a wonderful thing for these two head of states to meet. Ruby.
And so Himanshi, you mentioned that they have a push-pull relationship in terms of agriculture and food products, but Brazil and the UAE are both oil producers. In this aspect, are they collaborators or competitors?
See, they will be cooperative because these days relationships have become very, very transactional. Everyone is looking for what they can gain out of a relationship rather than having a competition. People believe in collaboration. So when they both are oil producers, yet the requirements and investments are very, very different. And as I brought out earlier, they can work on the field of clean energy initiatives, the hydrogen fuel, the biofuel, all those things give them an opportunity to come together and invest together and co-develop a lot of things for the clean energy, which can be of global use. Ruby.
Thank you so much for joining us, Colonel Himanshi Singh out of New Delhi. Now moving to our next story. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning recently announced that German Chancellor Friedrich Merz will visit China from February 25th to 26th. This will be Merz's first visit since he has taken office. Reports suggest that during the visit, President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang will meet with Merz to discuss bilateral relations and mutual concerns. Mao highlighted that China and Germany are strategic partners with strong cooperation, benefiting both the nations. She said that as the world's second and third largest economies, their relations align with global interests, and China hopes to use this visit to strengthen ties and contribute to global peace and prosperity.
第二大和第三大经济体，中德关系良好发展，符合双方的利益和世界的期待。中方愿同德方以此访为契机，增进理解互信，深化务实合作，秉持相互尊重、平等相待、互利共赢的原则，推动中德关系取得更大发展，共同为世界的和平与繁荣做出更大的贡献。
Japan's Fair Trade Commission has raided Microsoft Japan's offices as part of an investigation into whether the company improperly restricted users of its Azure cloud platform from using rival services. A source with direct knowledge of the matter confirmed the raid to routers, but remained anonymous due to the sensitive nature of the information. The Japanese antitrust authorities are suspected of examining whether Microsoft set conditions that limited access to popular services on other cloud platforms, effectively shutting out rivals. In addition to the raid, Japanese regulators are expected to seek clarification from Microsoft's parent company in the US. This investigation joins a growing international scrutiny of Microsoft's cloud practices, with regulators in Europe, the United States, and Brazil also looking into similar issues involving the software giant's services. The Milano Cortina 2026 Paralympic flame has made its way from Stoke Mandeville to the birthplace of the Paralympic movement to Turin, with the opening ceremony of the Games just 10 days away. The flame was created by Great Britain's four-time Paralympic medalist in para-alpine skiing, Millie Knight, alongside Andrea Macri, the vice-captain of Italy's para-ice hockey team, who will be attending his fourth Games in Milano Cortina. The Milano Cortina 2026 Paralympic Winter Games will take place from March 6th to 15th. The International Paralympic Committee has said that there will be up to 665 athletes from around 50 nations competing across 79 medal events throughout the Games, across 6 sports, which are para-alpine skiing, para-biathlon, para-cross-country, para-ice hockey, para-snowboard and wheelchair curling. And that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.